Good afternoon, students. Welcome to a discussion about the fallacies, which occurs in Chapter 8. So you know that we've been discussing in a previous video the 5 argument types: cause and effect argument, analogy argument, contradiction argument, statistical argument, and expert opinion. But now we're in Chapter 8, we're turning our attention to the fallacies. And it's interesting because the fallacies occur when an author is in the process of making an argument, but then that argument contains inconsistencies or weak connections or not enough evidence or not enough supporting data, or it may even attack the other opponent of the person speaking, but in some way there's a deficiency with the argument. But before I go into a discussion about the fallacies, let me go ahead and just read a basic list of the fallacies, and you'll see this in your chapter 8. So the basic fallacies that you're going to be responsible for on the midterm are ad hominem from the Latin ad hominem, to the man. So you're attacking a person rather than the person's argument. You're attacking their character. They're gay, they're a Muslim, they're too young, they're Donald Trump was attacking Greta Thunberg because she's got autism, that young gal from Sweden who is a big environmentalist, and he was attacking her for having some kind of autistic face, and just really kind of a rude person, not looking at her arguments at all. That's ad hominem. Appeal to emotion. So you're trying to adopt a stray dog this weekend, and then they'll show you the picture of a dog that's limping, a rescue dog. So they're appealing to your emotions. That's another form of fallacies, because it doesn't deal with rational arguments. It tries to create sentiment. Then you've got ad populum, which is appeal to the people. An appeal to the people is when someone will say, look at how popular this program is, therefore we should all do it. Car companies will say it's the fastest selling midsize in America, or McDonald's will say 1 billion served. But does that say anything about the quality of the hamburgers or the fast food in McDonald's? No, it's just 1 billion served. So the masses of the people, because the masses of the people like it, it must be a great product. That is ad populum to the people. Then you have ad ignoratium, or another word is appeal to ignorance. Another word for it is appeal to ignorance. It's like when you use an argument and you kind of base your argument on the fact that nobody has any evidence to disprove you. So for instance, you go, Martians helped the Egyptians make the pyramids. And then let's say somebody in the audience raises their hand and says, I've been listening to you at your TED Talks, but can you prove that? I mean, is there any evidence that Martians helped the Egyptians make pyramids? And the person will say, well, can you prove that they didn't? If you'll notice that the speaker is kind of relying on, or kind of justifying their argument based on the fact that nobody can ever really go back in time and disprove you. So you can't use the lack of evidence for something because it's in the distant past, or let's say it's something that's going to be in the distant future. Nobody's going to know what's going to future is going to be. And so you say this happened in the past, or this will happen in the future, because you can't prove that it won't. Well, notice you're appealing to the ignorance on the matter. Nobody has any direct proof on it, but you can't use the lack of information on something as your proof. That's appeal to ignorance. There is appeal to absurdity, or in Latin, when these things were all created, and when the senators were debating in the forum, the Roman forum, this is when these senators started to realize, that person is using a typical or an interesting rhetorical device. And they started to name and categorize these things in classes like rhetoric or in logic. And so another one is called reductio ad absurdum, and that is appeal to absurdity. It's like when you say, let's say 2 opponents are talking, and one of them will say, we need to give clean needles out to addicts. In other words, there's so many addicts that die of infected needles. Why don't we just have a clean needle program like they do in Europe? You'll have an addict come in, turn in a clean, dirty needle, and they'll get a clean needle. Let's say an opponent says that. And then another person in the same debate, maybe speaking at another podium, says, "Oh, I get it." Notice that there's a bit of sarcasm starting. It's appeal to absurdity. So the sarcasm this person starts to use is, "Oh, while we're at it, why don't we just give addicts, when they come in to trade their needle, a six-pack? And perhaps, we'll give them a little medical marijuana while we're at it. Why don't we just kind of encourage their addiction?" You'll notice that the first person making the argument wasn't trying to say anything out of the ordinary. He was trying to say that this is a policy used in Europe, giving clean needles out to addicts. But the other person tries to clown, tries to make the person sound ridiculous. And so that person uses an appeal to absurdity. Notice that the second person really tried to make, using sarcasm, made the first person's argument seem ridiculous. The first person wasn't talking about giving out weed, wasn't talking about giving beer, wasn't talking about enabling drugs at all, was talking about getting dirty needles off the street and making sure that if an addict used a needle, that they use a clean, sterilized needle. But the other person got clownish, and that's when you commit an appeal to absurdity. Then there's begging the question, when somebody doesn't really answer the question. So the president might be asked, "Mr. President, are you going to invade Syria?" And then the president will say, "America has got the greatest fighting force in the world." Well, that wasn't what we asked you. We asked you if you're going to invade Syria. And the president kind of dodges this. That's usually called begging the question. Then there's false dilemma. False dilemma is when somebody says, there's only two possibilities here. You're either for America or you're against America. Well, notice there could be a lot of other possibilities. Somebody could say, well, I love America, but I've got some problems here upon this particular issue. I'm a dissenting American. I want to take a middle ground. I don't want to just be trapped into A or B. But when somebody tries to trap you into A or B, and you'll see this a lot on Fox News, you're either a communist or you hate this country. What do you mean? Are those the only two options? That's when somebody is committing a false dilemma. You're saying it's either or. And typically that language somebody uses in a situation like that is either this or this. Then you have hasty conclusion, which we'll talk about, which somebody's just jumping to a conclusion. There's not enough evidence. For instance, if somebody says the global pandemic is going to be the end of the world economy by 2021, it's hurting the economy. I mean, oil prices are really down. The stock market is really down. But the end of the world economy, it's certainly going to hurt it. But that's the person's committing kind of a hasty conclusion. Questionable analogy. We'll get into this. Somebody might say, if you continue to see that ex-gangbanger boyfriend, you might as well just jump over the cliff or jump off the Coronado Bridge. Oh, you mean, so if I keep seeing this kind of sketchy person, not saying he's the best person, that's the same as me jumping off the bridge? That analogy is a little bit too extreme. Questionable authority. That's when somebody's not really an expert, but then they bring them on TV. Ellen DeGeneres, will bring somebody on, or what's this guy? Conan will bring somebody on, and they're a celebrity like Matt Damon or something, or somebody like that. Jennifer Lopez, and they're speaking about some new environmental concern. Kardashian does this a lot. She'll speak about different, like the prison industrial complex. But are those people really experts to speak on something like that? That's when you might say, kind of a questionable authority or not a good expert on that one. You've got poll fallacies, and these are fallacies that occur when people take a poll, or an institution takes a poll, the government takes a poll or a survey, but they don't interview enough people, or it's not wide enough, or they only interviewed old people, or they only looked at people in the South, or maybe only people in San Francisco or in LA. Those are different demographics than somebody in Iowa. So there's three different categories of poll fallacy that you should look into. There's small sample. Small sample is like you didn't ask enough people. Unrepresentative sample. unrepresentative is that you ask people in Miami or you ask people in, in Kentucky, very different demographics in different parts of the country. You have to kind of do a wide representative survey as opposed to an unrepresentative survey. And then, of course, there's leading questions in which you say, should we end the war in Afghanistan, which has been a meat grinder and has only led to destruction of our American youth? Well, you notice that question is already kind of prejudiced. You should just say, if somebody was asking a real legitimate question in a poll or in a survey, they'd say, should America withdraw from Afghanistan? Yes or no? Notice that the question is not biased. It's just a yes or no. You don't want to editorialize too much because that could be another form of a poll fallacy. Questionable cause. That's another kind of fallacy that occurs when you just haven't really connected the two issues that you're talking about. They'll say a school shooting was caused by some kid because they had a lot of violent games, or they're a gamer, and that's why they went on a school rampage. I don't know, did X really cause Y there? Could there be some motivation to the fact this kid was kind of like withdrawn and in their own little world of games? Yeah, but I'd want to talk to their parents. I'd want to talk to, blood chemistry, genetics, abuse issues. I'd want to talk about a lot of different issues other than violent video games. Questionable premise. That's a premise that, where somebody's saying, a good premise, for instance, a good premise would be all human beings die. All societies have subgroups. Businesses must put the client first. Those are all good premises. The cell is the basis of life. Those are all premises that have been proven. But a questionable premise would be all African Americans play the race card, or all Anglo Americans are racists. Those are generalizations. Those are questionable premises because it's too general. Then you have questionable statistics, which good statistics would be, when you can say this car gets this many miles per gallon, or you say the amount of money that a high school graduate makes, as opposed to somebody with a college graduate will make. The college graduate makes $1 million more over the period of their lifetime earnings. That's a statistical argument. But a questionable statistic, which is the fallacy, would occur when you're trying to say, take Tylenol, it gives you 30% pain relief. How do you measure 30% pain relief? Or, how would you even have an accurate understanding of how many people actually have coronavirus? You'll see this many people infected with coronavirus. But do they know about how many people are infected in coronavirus who live underneath the freeway? People who died in an old age home, they just kind of died and they think, well, he was 93 years old. But maybe they died of coronavirus, but they didn't test them. So there's all kinds of ways in which statistics are very, very likely to be inaccurate. Then you have red herring. Red herring is kind of like goes back to the days when a convict would maybe use dead fish to drag behind them as they ran away from a prison, or to throw the bloodhounds off the scent. That was one interpretation I heard for why this fallacy was called red herring. I heard another one in that kings and princes that wanted to find a fox, they didn't want to find the fox too quickly, so they would drag, or their attendants, the king's attendants, or the wealthy aristocrat, the attendants who worked on the land, would drag dead fish through the land so that the bloodhounds wouldn't find the fox so quickly, and there could be more sport instead of the bloodhounds finding the fox right away, and the hunt is over in 5 minutes. So I've heard different origins for the word red herring, but the fallacy itself occurs when somebody is being asked a question, or a corporation is being asked about something that they did, and they say, well, why are you looking at this issue? We should be concerned about this other issue. In other words, red herring is trying to throw everybody off the scent. I'm kind of diverting you off the scent. President Trump, when he was in all kinds of trouble early on in his presidency, was always worrying about Colin Kaepernick, those damn NFL greedy players. But Mr. President, we're talking to you about the stripper that you paid. And, isn't that, and you used your lawyer to make those payments, and you were in the White House. And you're talking about Colin Kaepernick? Aren't you diverting the attention? That's red herring. And then there's slippery slope. That's a classic one in which somebody will say, if you outlaw guns, then they're going to take our civil liberties, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, and we'll end up in North Korea with a totalitarian dictatorship. Whoa, bro, you kind of slipped all the way down like in a snowball there. A causes B, B causes C, C causes D, and it's a series of hypothetical problems that may happen, but it's kind of hypothetical. So that's why it's called a slippery slope. And then tu quoque, which is kind of a weird, you'll see it in the book, tu quoque, Latin, which means and you too. And in Spanish, it makes a little bit, y tú también. So when somebody's attacked about something, they go on the defensive and they say, well, you did it too. Will accuse China of human rights abuses, and they'll say, well, look at what you do to African Americans with the prison industrial complex. Or uh, we'll attack China. I already kind of mentioned that. Or China will say something about us, and then we'll say, well, China, you invaded Tibet in 1954, and you still haven't given that land back. And then China will say, yeah, we'll give back the land to the American Indians. So you're kind of, instead of looking at the fact, hey, maybe your policies were kind of bad when you grabbed land from people, but notice instead of cop to that, you just kind of throw it back on the other person. We do it in our homes too. Your parents will say, you better stop vaping or better do something, stop smoking. And you go, hey, you do it too. And so you kind of deflect attention. So there's a lot of different fallacies. And one of the things I need to get into with you is that, fallacies don't just occur out of the blue. They occur when somebody is in the process of making an argument. I thought I had this speech ready. Let me take another second here to see if I've got it. I thought I did, but anyway, fallacies occur when somebody, like during a TED Talks or during a speech or in a book or in a magazine or on social media, will make an argument. Usually one of the 5 argument types. But when they're using one of the 5 argument types, there's something weak about their argumentation, and then their argument then slips into a fallacy. So kind of want you to keep that in mind. Fallacies don't just originate out of nowhere. They originate because somebody's in the process of trying to prove a point about something, and then their argument is weak. So, for instance, let's say somebody's using a cause and effect argument about a school shooting. I kind of mentioned it before, and they say this was caused because this person had a big video game collection. Well, you can see that somebody's trying to argue that X causes Y, but there could be a lot of other reasons why that happened. So the cause and effect argument that they made actually slipped into a questionable cause fallacy. And weak cause and effect arguments can also fall into several other categories like hasty conclusion or questionable premise or even slippery slope or false dilemma. And you'll see on the handout that I'm kind of speaking over that you can see different examples of how when somebody's making a cause and effect argument, their argumentation can actually fall into different fallacy categories because they didn't ever really prove that X caused Y, if that makes sense. There's another kind of argumentation, like for instance, somebody's making an argument on YouTube or, as I said, TED Talks or in social media or on a talk show or in a book. And then they'll use another argument attempt, like an analogy argument. So I do have the text here for this one. So a good analogy argument might be, if we send our soldiers into combat without proper weapons, that's like asking a man to fight an opponent with his hands tied behind his back. Well, you can kind of see, yeah, if you don't have the right weaponry, you're putting somebody into a position to fail. This is a good analogy. But like I mentioned in my earlier dialogue, if a mother is concerned about the boyfriend that her daughter's dating and says, that ex-gangbanger is going to make you jump, it's going to be just, if you keep seeing them, it's just like jumping off the Coronado Bridge. Well, you can see mom's kind of using an analogy argument, but it kind of morphed into a questionable analogy fallacy. And that's true of other kind of fallacies. Let's say somebody uses a contradiction argument, which is the third argument type, right? There's cause and effect, there's analogy, and then there's contradiction arguments. So contradiction arguments, they can morph or kind of revert into questionable cause fallacies. So this is a fallacy like a contradiction argument can also, if it's a weak contradiction argument, it can fall into a questionable cause fallacy. So let me demonstrate that a little bit. Let's say someone, in an effort to produce a contradiction argument, points out that giving financial aid to make poor people independent just makes them more dependent. Can you see the contradiction argument? We're not going to get people to be more independent if we keep creating dependence on government. You're not going to get independence if you're creating dependence. So you can see that somebody's trying to point out we're not going to get something good if we keep doing the opposite of it. You're pointing out the contradiction. So this argument looks like it's pointed out a clear contradiction in the public policy, and it's done so effectively. But and that's true in many cases. In some cases, however, think about what's going on with the coronavirus. Government aid may be a great help in the short run to get people on their feet. And so the author, in the case mentioned above, may have, when they were trying to talk about we're not going to get independence if we keep creating dependence, that contradiction argument may in fact have been a questionable cause because it was weak argumentation. That's not really going to happen with giving out money, at least temporarily, because some people legitimately need it. I know I did. I'm hoping that you did too. And it's not going to make you somebody that's always going to beg the government for a handout. Okay, so that's contradiction argument. Statistical arguments are typically things that people use in argumentation, but sometimes on a TED Talks, or as I said, social media, or whatever, if in a book, or a magazine, or a talk show, a person could use a statistical argument. And good statistical arguments are really healthy forms of argumentation. For instance, I saw this from Pew Research. Pew Research, PEW, is kind of an independent think tank. They produce data on criminals, on single mothers, on college graduates, on people that have autism. Pew Research is just an independent think tank that takes government money, or let's just say philanthropy money, and they'll do research that's supposed to be used by government agencies for all kinds of different applications. It's an independent think tank. It's not supposed to be aligned with Republicans or Democrats or progressives or green people. It's just a think tank that puts out data. So this is from Pew Research, and this is good. This is the good use of statistics. When somebody's making a good statistical argument. I read this from Pew. It says today's millennials with a high school diploma earn 62% of what typical college graduate earns. In 2019, median income for recent graduates reached $44,000 a year for bachelor's degree holders aged 22 to 27, and for high school graduates the same age, the median earnings are $30,000 per year. So, it's not a huge difference, but $44,000 a year for college graduates as opposed to $30,000 a year for high school graduates. It's a good statistical argument. But statistical arguments can sometimes be very bad. For instance, medication commercials, Aleve, the medication pain reliever. Aleve, it reduces pain and inflammation by 25%. But you can't measure the pain reduction in people. I mean, you might have a pain tolerance. What does 25% pain reduction mean to you? It may mean something different to me. Pantene shampoo makes your hair 30% thicker or 30% stronger. Well, my hair is kind of fine. Your hair might be thicker. How are we going to measure the thickness of hair based on shampoo? But people use statistics like this. Use Clinique skincare. It will reduce fine lines and aging by 10 years. Well, what would 10 years of reduction of wrinkles look like? We can't measure that. So statistics are used poorly all the time. And a poor statistical argument can also fall into several different categories of fallacies. So a poor statistical argument can simply be a questionable statistic fallacy. That's the typical fallacy that it can fall into. But it also can be a poll fallacy. So a bad use of polls or surveys or census, like they're taking a United States census right now. If you use bad methodology, that can also be a statistical fallacy. So remember, statistical arguments are good, but they can also fall into several categories of fallacy. Ad populum. If you use bad statistics, or you're trying to use a statistical argument to say like 1 billion people have eaten McDonald's burgers, well, the use of public preference, it's popular, and you're using a number, but it's not really a good statistical argument because 1 billion, when was that taken? McDonald's is selling burgers at every moment of the day. So what does 1 million mean? It's not really a good statistic. So that's another way in which somebody's making one of the 5 argument types, but then if it's a weak argument, then it slips into fallacy zone. So I'm trying to make this real clear in my presentation with you that fallacies don't just occur out of nowhere. They occur when somebody's speaking or publishing or presenting some information somewhere, data somewhere, and they're using one of the 5 argument types, but then there's a breach or a problem with the data that they're using or the causal connections that they're making. There's something wrong with their argument type. So it slips into a fallacy. And then the last kind of argument type that you can have is expert opinion. Expert opinion is a really good way for you and I to make arguments. We're a defense lawyer, and so we'll bring in a coroner from LA County to say, well, where do you think that bullet wound came from? And the coroner, who's done thousands of autopsies, will say this bullet came from behind. So you can see that that's a good use of expert opinion. This is what we do when we use footnotes in a works cited page or a works citation. We're bringing in an expert because we're college students, so we want to buff up our argumentation by using an expert in the field, either in history or in science or math or psychology or anything in which the person has tremendous credentials. But that's a good form of argumentation using experts. But what if I bring in, Leonardo DiCaprio or Matt Damon or Angelina Jolie to come and speak about, environmental issues or some other issues? They're not the experts, that we should be consulting. So now your argumentation is kind of weak because you brought in Jane Fonda. Certainly good people, maybe, they become expert on their own, but there's other things that maybe they're not as expert about. And just in conclusion, I want to also mention to you that you'll notice that there's quite a number of fallacies that didn't fall into any particular group. For instance, if you're talking about appeal to emotion, well, that's just a fallacy that just kind of stands on its own because you're just trying to create sentiment in a person. It's not a cause and effect argument. It wasn't a statistical argument. You're just trying to use sentiment, like rescue this stray dog. Sentiment, that kind of thing. So that doesn't typically fall within the 5 argument types, but it is a way that people try to argue, but then it's weak argumentation, and it stands on its own. It doesn't really fit within variations of the 5 argument types. They're just particular kind of standalone fallacies. I hope that makes sense to you. And then there's other ones. Ad ignorantiam. I mentioned this at the beginning of the class, but this is a fallacy in which somebody's relying on the lack of evidence. So it doesn't fall within the 5 argument types. It stands on its own because somebody's trying to get over on the public by saying, well, you can't prove that I'm wrong, so therefore I must be right. That kind of stands on its own as a fallacy. Reductio ad absurdum. I mentioned it in my opening, but that's also kind of like when you just try to use sarcasm. So you kind of attack somebody by using sarcasm. You attack their argument by using sarcasm. Ad hominem, that doesn't really fall into any particular category of the 5 argument types. because it's more of an attack on the person speaking. You're trying to poison them with going after their credentials or their background or their character. Um, and then there's red herring. I mentioned that again at the opening, in which you're trying to divert attention by saying, "Why are you attacking me? Look over there." And then tu quoque doesn't really fit within the 5 argument types either, but it's kind of like when somebody's under attack, they attack you so that they don't really have to own anything that they do. So anyway, hopefully this gives you a little background in terms of fallacies. You can see that argument types and fallacies are closely related, because a fallacy occurs when an argument type is defective in some way. Does that make sense? So somebody's making an argument and just didn't make the connections or prove it in a substantial way. So hopefully this helps you now as you um, go into your fallacy. We're going to have a fallacy pre-quiz, a fallacy kind of midterm practice quiz, and as you do your fallacy homework this weekend. Okay, out. Bye.